moment to rename yourselves in Zoom with your full name, organization, and pronouns, that would be wonderful. My name is Peggy Nguyen. I am with the City of Los Angeles, LA Sanitation Environment, and the UCLA Institute of the Environment and Sustainability. And I'd like to thank the forum's sponsor and host, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and the Local Government Commission for including me in this year's forum. On their behalf and on behalf of my fellow workshop facilitators, Rima Chakra from Rincon Consulting and Whitney Brennan of the California Tahoe Conservancy, it is my pleasure to welcome you this morning to our first of 3 workshops on integrated adaptation planning for holistic solutions. During the previous webinar, we had a wonderful panel of speakers who shared with us their insights and experience about the cascading and compounding effects of climate change and gave us many examples of how to address them. We came away from that webinar with a deeper understanding of the complexity of climate change impacts and a better grasp of how to holistically address this complexity. The purpose of today's interactive workshop is to explore major challenges shared amongst adaptation practitioners when pursuing integrated adaptation planning. We will be delving into 5 key challenge areas and gain a clearer understanding of specific issues and barriers. We'll begin to identify case studies, promising practices, and potential solutions to overcome identified challenges. Before we get started, I would like to review our group norms. And I am going to go ahead and share that on the screen as well. Oh, actually, there we go. Thank you. So the California Adaptation Forum Code of Conduct basically asks that participants behave in a courteous and respectful manner in order to preserve open dialogue. We'd like to ask participants to please abide by this code of conduct and norms during our workshop. And I will very quickly go through the group norms. First, we'd like to ask you to please stay engaged, stay present, actively engage in discussions, and guard against the learned tendency to disengage. Please remain focused on the topic at hand and the workshop objectives. Next, please practice compassionate listening. Listen deeply and approach the dialogue with an attitude towards learning. Test your assumptions and inferences. Listen to understand, not to respond. Next, please take space and make space. Practice brevity to make room for others to share their perspective. Be aware of the privileged identities you may hold to balance your participation and create an inclusive environment. Be courageous. Take risks to speak from personal experiences and respectfully share your honest thoughts and opinions. Be personally responsible for pushing yourself into real dialogue. Finally, expect and accept a lack of closure. Overcoming the multifaceted challenges of adaptation takes time. There's no quick fix. Notice how the process of dialogue itself can serve as stepping stones toward tangible solutions. In order to have a productive dialogue in a virtual environment, we ask that participants also adhere to the following Zoom meeting participation standards. Please use the hand raising feature to be unmuted. Please use the chat function to voice agreement. Please turn your camera on for breakout discussions or for the full duration of workshops as technology and connectivity allows. Please limit distractions and avoid multitasking. Take breaks as needed to care for yourself. With that, I would just like to let you know that we will be sharing this Google Doc of group norms with you in order to give you an opportunity to suggest new norms and to make improvements. And we will be creating a final set of norms to share at our next workshop. With that, we are going to get started. I would now like to introduce my co-facilitator, Whitney Brennan, who will now facilitate a visioning exercise to get us started. Whitney?
Thanks, Peggy. So we'd like to start off here with a visioning exercise. We are talking here today about integrated adaptation planning, but we might all have different ideas of what that means. What's the end goal? What are we all trying to get at? What are we trying to accomplish? So what I'm going to do is share 2 different visions of adaptation and integrated adaptation planning visions with you. And then we're going to do an exercise where we can also all come up with words and phrases that that tell us what it means to you guys. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, so the first one I want to share with you is the vision for adaptation from the ICAR TAC. So this is the Integrated Climate Adaptation and Resiliency Program from the state of California, from their Technical Advisory Committee. This is a vision for all adaptation. So I'm going to read it to you. All Californians thrive in the face of a changing climate. Leading with innovation, California meets the challenge of climate change by taking bold actions to protect our economy, our quality of life, and all people. The state's most vulnerable communities are prioritized in these actions. Working across all levels of government, the state is prepared for both gradual changes and extreme events. Climate change adaptation and mitigation is standard practice in government and business throughout the state. California meets these goals with urgency while achieving the following long-term outcomes. All people and communities respond to changing average conditions, shocks, and stresses in a manner that minimizes risks to public health, safety, and economic disruption, and maximizes equity and protection of the most vulnerable. Natural systems adjust and maintain functioning ecosystems in the face of change. Infrastructure and built systems withstand changing conditions and shocks, including changes in climate, while continuing to provide essential services. So this is a great starting place for us. What we decided to do was also come up with a draft vision for this track. What do we think? What are we hoping to get out of integrated adaptation planning in this track? This is what we came up with. Adaptation planning efforts effectively address the cascading and compounding impacts of climate change, spanning all areas and levels of government to create holistic adaptation solutions that address impacts to people and communities, natural systems, working lands, built infrastructure, and social and economic systems. Now we would like to ask you to join us in adding to this. We would like you to go to menti.com, enter the code you see on this slide here. Then you will be able to add some words. You can start doing this as needed. What we're looking for is words that stood out to you in the vision we provided, the draft vision, or ones you think are missing. What do you think of when you think of integrated adaptation planning? What does this mean to you? So you can feel free to enter words. After we have a few minutes of this, then I'll ask Julia to share the word cloud that came out of this so we can see what highlights there are. So feel free to enter some words for a few minutes.
Sorry for the silence, y'all. We were hoping to play some background music while y'all reflect, but we can't share sound while the screen's being shared. So imagine some music in the background. It looks like folks are continuing to drop their ideas in the word cloud. I'm going to go ahead and just type the draft vision into the chat. And if you want to stop sharing your screen, Whitney, I'll put up the Mentimeter results so folks can see how it's shaping up.
All right. So it looks like we're seeing a lot of holistic, equity, natural systems, compounding. So thinking about compounding impacts, resilience, thinking about communities, cascading and compounding impacts, things that are integrative, leveraging partnerships, having empathy. There's a lot of connection to community involvement, community engagement. Is there anyone that would like to raise their hand and comment on, share any reflections on why they added certain words or things they thought were missing or things they thought are important in this draft vision? I'm not sure how to see hand raising, so hopefully, Julia, you can help me if anyone raises their hand.
Looks like Paul has his hand raised. Go ahead and unmute. Feel free to unmute yourself, Paul.
Okay, yeah. I guess one thing that has been bothering me, and I say this having seen what's going on at a local level, is a very strong focus on fixing climate change by doing things now, but not really reimagining how the systems we have now might be more effective, lower cost, more reliable if we start to reimagine or redesign the local systems. And the example is, we're going to fix decarbonized buildings by putting a heat pump in place of a gas-fired appliance. It's very convenient, it's very easy, but it might be leaving a lot on the table. And how do we get a more systems assessment before we make a decision on what's the best thing to do?
Thank you, Paul. Would anyone else like to raise their hand and comment on what stood out to you in the draft vision or what was missing? All right. It looks like Matt. Would you like to come off mute?
Yeah, sorry I can't come off camera right now. I'm helping with some logistics, but I'm on a lot of these across the state, and there's a lot of very interesting technical contributions and solutions that are suggested by. I continue to find that these processes are unable to move forward without really an honest appraisal of the racist history that has set up our lands, our working lands, and the sequestration of lands from communities of color, and the inequitable distribution of wealth, and our adaptive capacity. So all of these initiatives grind to a halt if we're not frank and honest about power sharing and being anti-racist from the beginning. So I hope to carve out a little space for that concept.
Thank you, Matt. I think we have time for one more comment. If there's anyone else that would like to raise their hand and comment on the vision statement. Okay, Michael, would you like to say something? Michael, you raised your hand. If you would like to come off mute, you can speak.
Am I here?
I hear you.
Okay. One of the systems considerations is uncertainty, and being honest about how uncertainty is engaged and what are the implications of uncertainty. And that's really, really important. And so much of this discussion has happened in terms of international development. And it's always ended up in lack of communication. And this seems a really good approach to understanding systemic change, but I think there has to be more logical coherence to make it make sense.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. So I appreciate everyone's comments, contributions here. What we're hoping to do is bring in some of your comments word statements from the word cloud, and we're going to revise the vision statement, and we'll bring it back to you as a follow-up to ground the future work of this track. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Rima, who's going to introduce the next section of our workshop. I'm going to share.
Thanks, Whitney. So my name is Rima Chakra. I'm with Rincon. I'm a climate adaptation program manager. And we wanted to sort of shift gears now that we've started to think through and formulate a vision of integrated adaptation solutions. We wanted to have 4 breakout rooms to give everyone here today a chance to kind of brainstorm and discuss the challenges that inhibit us from achieving that sort of idealized future condition or that vision statement. And so this slide will show the first key challenge, which we would like to have a breakout group to focus on a discussion around insufficient resources. What resources are we lacking to help address the cascading and compounding effects of climate change? Is it a lack of funding, a lack of adequate staffing, or staffing expertise and training? Are there tools that you're missing that can help you support the decision-making process that would help us get closer to integrated planning solutions? Are there gaps in understanding future climate scenarios? Like we just heard earlier, the inherent uncertainty of future projected conditions. How does that in turn limit our ability to take action today? So that's one breakout group that you can join. The second is looking at competing priorities. Grant funders, policymakers at various levels of government, local elected officials, advocacy groups, special districts, utilities, private sector, all of those groups have different set of priorities, and often these priorities are at odds with one another, or sometimes at odds with climate adaptation goals. Also, what about the fundamental need to address existing social and economic inequities that have really manifested themselves in communities of color? There's also the push for post-COVID economic recovery. How can the focus be on climate adaptation with all of these different dynamics at play? And for the third challenge, this group would discuss siloed sectors. So when you look at trying to address the issues of cascading effects of climate change, it certainly does require a holistic response to climate change. And yet we have our government silos between departments, between different levels of government, other entities engaged that make it very difficult. So this group would discuss how are we siloed, what are the impediments to better communication and better cross-cutting, cross-sector, cross-jurisdictional solutions. There's also the challenge of addressing near-term emergencies while also planning and preparing for long-term impacts. And for our last challenge, this group would discuss ineffective. Are the governance systems that we have in place effective at addressing cascading compounding effects? When we look at different adaptation solutions, sometimes they would need to span multiple jurisdiction or geographic boundaries, or a decision that's made upstream or up coast could affect communities downstream or down coast. Are regional entities, metropolitan planning organizations, or council of governments set up to play a key role? Are their governance systems effective at facilitating community-based approaches that address community needs first and foremost? So that would be the fourth breakout group, and you can self-select which group you join. So we'd like to talk about all these different challenges and discuss them, and we really want to understand the barriers to help us achieve that vision. And we'll start off with that. Later today, we'll go back to our breakout groups and talk about potential solutions. But for the beginning, we'd like to start off by just sort of identifying challenges. So in the breakout groups, you will have a facilitator that will be guiding the discussion, and you will be provided a link to what's called a Jamboards. It's basically a whiteboard with sticky notes, and we'll be inviting you to apply sticky notes on the Jamboard so that we could start to collect input and ideas and a discussion around these key challenges. So I think, am I sharing my screen, or Julie, are you going to, oh, I think I'm going to share my screen, sorry. One moment, let me get up. Show you how it works, but hopefully you'll all find it pretty intuitive. So you'll be linked directly to the group that you self-select yourself into. And you can see we've got different topics along the top. And to add a sticky note, you simply select this icon, type in your comments, and then hit save, and it'll post itself here. And you can move it around and do another one. And we're asking everyone to apply just the yellow sticky note setting.
Excellent. Any questions before we launch into the breakout discussions?
I don't know where I am.
Yeah, so based on what folks submitted through the pre-survey, we've pre-populated some of the breakouts, but everyone also has the ability to move to a different room. There will be a number of you who are unassigned because we didn't get a response from you. So we'll open this up. I'll be in the main room to help folks navigate. And we'll have about 35 minutes in these breakouts, and you'll get a 5-minute heads up before we close. All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch into the breakouts. Enjoy the conversation.
All right. Hope you guys all had a good first session talking about challenges. What we're going to do right now is have a little stretch break, bio break. The facilitators are going to be organizing the Jamboard slides to prepare us for the next breakout discussion. Feel free to look through everybody else's Jamboard slides for the other categories, but please do not edit at this point because the facilitators are going to be moving stuff around. You'll definitely have a chance after this whole workshop is over to look through some of these Jamboards and add things as needed. So yeah, we'll see you guys back in 10 minutes. I guess that would be 11:12. See you guys then.
Or like overlapping.
Julia or Juliet?
Juliet.
I have not.
I didn't touch that one.
Okay. Thanks to our participants. If you're just listening in to us as we coordinate, we'll get started here in a minute, but you're getting a peek into the back of house coordination that takes place.
Whitney, Peggy, I think I did what I could with yours. They look pretty good.
Okay,
Whitney, can I help you?
Julia already helped me a lot. Thanks, Julia. So I think I'm good. Thanks for the help.
Great.
You can check out Ineffective Governance and help out there, Julia.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
It's only on one page, right?
Yes.
I probably should have paused the recording during all of that. Sorry, y'all. But welcome back. We're going to move into our next round. Rima, did you want to tee things up for us?
Yes, so thanks everyone for coming back. Hopefully you had a good short break. So we all broke out into our groups and discussed different challenges to try to achieve that integrated vision that we talked about at the beginning. And so now is the harder task, I think, of actually identifying some solutions. And we'd like to really drill down into those types of solutions to look at any example case studies, specific resources, if there's promising practices or strategies that you've seen used in some areas that could be replicated in others. Also keeping the door open to just big ideas, small ideas that haven't been tested, but that could be useful for addressing some of these challenges. And any chance for you to share sort of your own personal work or experiences would be great to have. So we'll be going back to the same groups that we were previously in, and we will be coming back. This session will be a little bit shorter. I think we have, is it 20 minutes, 25 minutes?
25 minutes for this one. Mhm.
Okay, and then we'll, each breakout group will want to identify the person to report back to the main workshop group. So please volunteer if you're interested in reporting out the discussion that was had for each group. And I think that's it. So we'll still be using our Jamboards to put together some solutions to our challenges.
All right, y'all, enjoy. We'll give you some time reminders, and I'll put you all in the breakouts now.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. So that second breakout was a little faster, but the intent there was to start to identifying solutions. So we'd really like to hear from all 4 groups. Starting with group 1, you have a couple of minutes just to sort of share the challenges and the identified solutions.
Great. Hi, I'm Juliet, and ours was on insufficient resources. And when we first identified the challenges, they sort of lumped into, I think we've got actually 5 categories. One's a little hidden, but funding, lack of funding, kind of some comments around the lack of translation of the science, and then this missing kind of piece of then, okay, great, we have the science, now what? And then related to funding, of course, is the capacity issue. And then underneath here, let me see if I can bring it out, was just this kind of general life COVID piece of the world that we live in now, where we just don't have the time to brainstorm and think, and it links back over on the funding side, you know, that there's just not the time and the funding available to carefully monitor, review, and adapt. Sorry, you might hear my partner getting the lunch order from my daughter as I'm speaking, so the challenges were really around these sort of 5 bins. We found that sort of the solutions binned across these. So part of the challenge with funding is that there's this lack of political will, because if you don't have the political will, then you're not going to have the funding being moved to where your particular side thinks it needs to be. So we talked about the need for education and awareness raising, providing, you know, the awareness begins at K through 12, but that there needs to be education across. And so that can help fund and lead to resolving some of these capacity issues. On the capacity side, we just talked about limited staffing resources. So, you know, not having the engineering or planning staff. So one solution is hiring subject matter experts. The other one that I'm sure we've all experienced is that you've got this amazing experienced staff on hand, and then they get a different job, and so you lose that knowledge. And so what are some of the strategies that we can have in place to keep that information in-house? So things from standard operating procedures to connections roadmaps, so when someone comes in, they know who to call. And then some of the other questions were around just, you know, lack of, we have all this great information, now how do we move that into decision making or making plans, or, you know, bringing it to the actual project? And so some of the things that we identified was showing case studies and best practices. So one that was called out was some work that USGS has done in post Montecito plus the mudslides from a few years back. And so just really drawing on examples from out in the field. And I think that's where I'll stop. Invite, of course, my group to put anything in the chat that I may have neglected, but thanks so much.
Thanks, Juliet. So let's move to group 2.
Okay, so our group is competing priorities. We have 9 topics. I'm going to run through them really quickly. The first topic is conflicting misaligned priorities. And this refers mostly to kind of agencies. So the first one is it's hard for utilities to completely support conservation efficacy because it affects their bottom line. So one solution we came up with is that state regulation mandates utility companies to evolve. The second is sometimes some agencies have no climate adaptation section in their organizational chart, and therefore there's no budget. So one solution would be to find a precedence of a jurisdiction that has that in their organizational chart, and then advocate for a new climate division. And also climate-led adaptation planning can involve state agencies, to get the work done, and also to help smaller jurisdictions. There's also the siloed the silo problem that some agencies have. And the way to get around that is to identify how both or all agencies can win, like what the common goals and objectives can be. And also to revisit OPR general plan guidelines that tells everyone to work together. Another problem is fire department wants clear sky. Folks who are interested in providing shade for extreme heat areas want more like awnings and structures around the home. So maybe make a space between the building and the public right away. So the fire people could do their job, and also there could also be shade. There's lobbying from polluting industries. Fund the advocacy groups that can stand up to them. Cross-jurisdictional, conflicts. Look to the COGS for more funding, and also to require. I'm not sure what the LAFCOs to include climate change impacts as meaningful criteria in their analysis and recommendations. Second topic we have is conflicting priorities in the community. Short-sighted lobbying. Fund the advocacy groups is the solution that we came up with. Older folks who don't see an ROI for retrofitting their homes in the WUI, create programs that like grants to help them afford that. A third category is funding. So government services are, that's where all the money goes. There's no money left for climate action. So one solution we came up with was to add maintenance endowments to make it possible for the climate actions, and also to align housing needs and requirements with adaptation planning. Okay, so there's now the next problem is about planting new trees or maintaining existing trees, because the existing trees are providing some shade. Reach out to AmeriCorps. The solution is to reach out to AmeriCorps or the Climate Conservation Course to help with maintaining. Retrofits may in the WUI can impact people on fixed incomes. Providing grants could be a solution. Bonds cost too much and are restricted from funding programmatic solutions. So make it so that bonds can actually fund the programmatic solutions. Okay, so next we have existing inequalities to adapting to climate change as our topic.
Caroline, I'm so sorry to interrupt. We have 2 more groups to go through. If you wanted to try to summarize, we'll be sharing the Jamboards out again for folks to review the full sticky notes. If you wanted to wrap up in about a minute.
Yeah, it's really hard to wrap this up. I think I would say the general patterns are, if there's a problem, like look to see if there's a precedence or some other model that's working out there, and to adopt those models, and also to fund advocacy groups, and also to encourage local jurisdictions to actually get educated, and to support that and set aside time to learn new skills. Is there anything else my group would like to add?
No, thanks for doing that, Caroline. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Okay, let's hear from the third group on siloed sectors.
Hey there. So we focused on siloed sectors, and we found kind of three main categories of challenge. One being institution or sector issues. This is a lot about what's guiding your agency. There's certain regulations, code, mandates that are kind of restricting your ability to kind of work across silos or sectors. Are there funding issues, funding constraints, because funding is focused on specific sectors or topics? And just some leadership or kind of doing things business as usual as they've always been done, and not kind of thinking outside the box across silos. The second being more public community equity issues, thinking the public, I guess some of it being history of racial discrimination, and how does equity and racism play into these things, and are we even considering those in our planning efforts, and how do we integrate those? And how do we think about social issues when we're thinking about very specific engineering issues? How do we do that? And also just how are people getting educated about issues? How do they learn about issues? And how can we get people to think about long-term and not just near-term issues? The third one being more working better together. So thinking of how do people, having the issue of people not knowing people in other agencies, not knowing how to work across agencies, not having avenues to work together, not understanding each other's language, a lot of things like this. So we can start with this one, but some of the solutions here for some of this working better together is a lot of what we talked about is how do we have more overall collaborative groups? And it's hard because maybe there's so many different topics and sectors. How do we have that kind of overarching group? So there was a suggestion to have kind of state funding to help have regional climate coordinators that are helping people network, right? So you might not know the right person, but these people can get you in touch and they can connect you to those people. And we had some interesting models of watershed coordinators or broadband collaboratives that have been developed via CPUC funding that maybe can be some kind of models for how do we collaborate. So back to these other ones for public issues, it's a lot of getting the public involved. How do we have a solution to that? Having people educated and involved and really understanding the issues so they can encourage people to work across silos, they can rally the governments, they can kind of push people to do this integrated planning. For institution sector issues, a lot of it is there someone that can oversee this and push the agency heads to work together, work across silos, hold them accountable to this? Are there funding, can we make funding sources more broad reaching across silos? Can we make leadership really care more about pushing agencies to work across silos? Okay. Sorry, that was my quick summary.
Thanks, Whitney. Okay, and then I'll wrap this one up. This was the fourth group on ineffective governance, and we organized challenges across just sort of organizational, how our governance structure is organized currently, and it being a challenge, political will, and conflicting agendas, funding and the way funding is set up, collaboration or lack of it, and then the complexity of the tools and data or lack of tools and data. So organizationally, there was some concepts or case studies shared, including in Sandag, which is in the San Diego region, where both inland and coastal communities agreed to tax themselves to support a Sandag or region-wide beach nourishment program. We also heard about water agencies working across jurisdictions and looking at watershed scale type solutions to address water challenges. And then on the political front, there was mention of the challenges that politicians have different agendas, and that there's a lack of enforcement of the public trust doctrine. And then when it comes to funding, there was mention that, you know, lower resource communities don't have the ability to compete for funding, and yet they may have higher need to access funds. So some suggestions to really encourage funding to be linked to requiring mandating partnerships across jurisdictions to break through that silo. Collaboration, there were some examples of collaborations between health departments and tribal governments and county governments that were useful to hear. And then with tools and data, sort of the emphasis that there's a lot of tools and data, but it's kind of spread across multiple projects and tools, and to consider using existing tool platforms rather than creating new ones to try to address data needs. So with that, thank you all for a great discussion at all the breakout groups. We'll give it over to Peggy to wrap us up.
Thanks, Rima, and thank you everyone today for your participation and for helping to build up our knowledge base on how to best develop holistic solutions for climate adaptation. Just briefly in summary, what we learned today is that political will, education, awareness, outreach are all important for allocating funding and resolving capacity issues. We need to hire more subject matter experts and internalize their knowledge in our SOPs and other aspects of our organizations and relationships. We can overcome silos and work together by identifying common objectives and developing a common language, dedicating resources to it, providing advocacy funding to make sure all voices and vulnerable populations are represented and cared for, and use successes as models. Sandag was given as an example where communities tax themselves to fund regional organization and efforts. Collaboration then, resource and data and tool sharing are the key. So we will be sharing the following resources from this wonderful workshop. We'll be sharing the main session recording and the notes, and also the Jamboard slides once we've cleaned them up. We will also share the following for review and input: the group norms that I showed you at the very beginning, and a summary document of key challenges and solutions, as well as an updated draft vision statement to guide our future work together. I'd like to let you know when our next workshop is. It is scheduled for August 17th from 1 to 3 p.m. and we hope that you will join us. The focus of that workshop will be community engagement, collaboration, grassroots, and building relationships and communication channels, collaboration necessary for integrated planning, multi-agency, multi-sector, and multidisciplinary approaches. And we will also be looking at our Jamboards to identify any additional priority areas that you have identified during the workshop today. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you again in August. A shout out to all of the facilitators, OPR, and Local Government Commission for all of your hard work on this. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. We'll see you in a few weeks and we'll follow up shortly.
Thank you.